Welcome to our forum discussion. Today's subject is the Middle East. Let me introduce you now to the student participants. First, from Jordan, here is Farouk Arif Al-Arif, 17 years old. Farouk lives in Jerusalem. His father is mayor of Jerusalem. Next to him is 16-year-old Zora Arshevsky. Zora comes from Israel, lives in Haifa. Gladys Kervij from the Lebanon, 18 years old. The Lebanon is the only Arab state that consistently sends a girl as a representative to the forum instead of a boy. And from the United Kingdom, 18-year-old Judith Reeder. Now, to help us tonight understand a little bit better than we do some of the facts about life in the Middle East today, I think we ought to start perhaps by getting some of the essentials such as population, literacy rates, area. What can you tell us, for example, on population figures?
Well, I may think that the population of Israel is about 1,700,000. I think the population of the Arab League comes to 45 million, but I'm not very sure if it's the exact number.
Is that right, Farouk and Gladys, about 45 million?
Yes, it's right. And the population of Lebanon is just the same, nearly to Israel. It's 1.5 million, and the literacy rate is 85% are educated.
Does this figure, 45 million, take in Arab countries in North Africa, for example?
No, this 45 millions include only the countries in the Arab League.
The countries in the Arab League.
But it excludes the countries outside the Arab League. For example, countries in North Africa like Tunisia and Algeria, and countries in the Arab Peninsula like Kuwait and Bahrain and Aden.
Mm-hmm.
But the 45 millions are just Arab League.
And what about literacy rates in the different countries of this area?
The literacy rate in Israel is 90%. It's not the same in the Arab countries. It's much lower. But I don't think it's a fair question.
Why isn't it a fair question, Zara?
Because you see, Israel began its development only in the 20th century. So naturally, it copied the standard of living and all the modern things from the European and the Western countries. But the Arab countries have a very long and strong tradition of the feudal system. And in it, a very high percent of the population live in terrible conditions. No education and nothing of the modern civilization. And only very recently they began to develop and to come to the same way of living as in the Western countries.
Of course, Lebanon's an exception.
Well, I want to draw her attention that in Lebanon we have 80% of the people educated, and we have a higher standard of living than the other Arabian countries, due to that Lebanon was never had the feudal system that existed in the other Arab countries, and that's why all the people were free and were trying to improve society, and that's why we have a higher standard of living in Lebanon.
What would you say for the other Arab states? The literacy rate would vary between, well, your country is fairly high. In Jordan?
Yes, I think in comparison to other Arab countries, it's high, but I don't, as Zohar said, I think it's not fair to speak about all Arab countries because you see variety of places, and they are in different places, and distance between, for example, Yemen and Jordan, we have great distance, and in the same time you have great difference in culture. But what I think now, what everybody is noticing in the Arab world, that you, in the rate of advance, you have, the Arab countries are advancing in this last generation more than any time in the history.
I was amazed by the number of the Saudi Arabian students that came to the American University in Beirut. 10 years ago, you couldn't find as much as you find now, and each year it's increasing. Students from the Kuwait and the other countries where they were almost deserts, and oil was found there. So now they're bettering their education, and all of them are flocking to the universities and colleges to study more. And
when you say all, this is very interesting to me, European, because we tend to regard the Middle East as a huge landmass where most people haven't had a chance until recently. Can you be more specific about when you say you're making rapid strides in social conditions and education? Does that mean that everybody, for example, in Jordan has the opportunity of having education?
Oh yes, I can say that. For example, now in Jordan they are trying to make education compulsory for elementary and secondary, but now it's only for elementary. I can give an example of other Arab countries, like Kuwait. I think they are spending money for education more than what we are spending in Jordan for anything else. I mean, they are spending tremendous amounts of money for building schools and improving their system of education.
And that's the same in Israel?
I may say it's the same in Israel. You see, the free education is only elementary in the last year of kindergarten. And the reason why we don't have high education free is only because the government is too poor. That's the only reason. But I may say that there's equal chance to everybody to have education. And I know that we're even trying to educate adults who are illiterate. I've just received a letter from home. So a friend writes to me that my whole scout troop is going to the transit camp when the new immigrants are living, and though they have lots of homework and everything to do, they simply teach them Hebrew, teach them the language to know and to read. And I think it's much more important what they do. They try to make them feel that we're all brothers and we're interested in them.
Do you mean the whole world, or just
No,
those in Israel?
in our country, because you see, we've brought immigrants from about 60 countries, and the number it is, as I say, I don't exaggerate, and it's a very difficult problem.
It must be awfully difficult with the language problem, for one thing, that you have.
Yeah, you see, now you can go with Hebrew everywhere, but in the first year, you had to know someplace you had to know German or Yiddish or Arabic or Hungarian, or every word another language was spoken.
Farouk, can you tell us something about things you've actually seen around you in Jordan? People getting an education now that wouldn't have been getting an education, say, 10 or 20 years ago.
Oh, for example, now they're giving, I mean, in government schools, because we have two types of schools. We have private schools and government schools. In government schools, they are trying to give everything, education, and even some places they give clothes to students to encourage them, I mean, and they're trying to support them even to continue their secondary education and to send them in scholarship to foreign universities or to Arab universities.
Where do you go to school, for example?
I go to, after I finished my high school, I went to AUB, that's the American University in Beirut, which is in Lebanon.
But you went also in Ramallah, didn't you?
Yes, I've studied in American school, run by the Quakers. It's the American Friends Boys School.
What would you say, each of you, is the most important political event that's taken place in your countries in your lifetime?
Well, I may say that my country was established, and I think it's no doubt the greatest event that may happen, because before 1947, it was called Palestine then. It was under the British mandate. So we really, it's very unpleasant to say, but the British didn't feel their responsibilities toward us. I'm sorry.
In what way can you be? Because of course that interests me. Can you tell me?
Yes, I may explain you. When how was it called? The League of Nations decided to give Palestine to the British mandate. So some of the conditions were to bring immigration and to increase the area of land which you may settle on, and anyhow to prepare Israel to a time when it would be, I think the term was the nation home, never mind about
Yes,
the term.
the national home of the Jewish
Yes,
people.
anyhow, that there's going to be a state that a majority of it is Jewish, and they stopped the immigration and they didn't allow to buy more land. For instance, have you ever heard about Cyprus? If I suppose you have.
I have.
So it tells very much to most of the Jewish people, because after the Second World War, many Jews had simply no place to live in. They were thrown out of most of the countries. And then Israel was the only place.
Yes, but it
And-
was an Englishman. It was our Foreign Secretary Balfour who made the declaration on
Yes, he
Palestine,
made- and
who said that it should be a land for the Jewish people to go back to.
exactly
Excuse
so.
me.
And when they came,
I think you must be grateful to England, because had it not
Thank
been
you.
to England, you will not have your homeland, what you call homeland. I mean-
we are grateful to England, but it doesn't mean that we don't see mistakes.
Everybody makes mistakes.
Well, but we happen to suffer them.
I'd
So
like,
the-
excuse me, I'd like awfully, though, to ask you how the difficulty in the Middle East now affects you in your daily life right now. How does it affect you, for example, Farouk?
Now, during, I mean, the present time, I don't think it affects me. I mean, you mean the situation between the Arab and the Jews? It doesn't affect me now, but I think in the future it will affect me in case of any war between the Arab and the Jews. For example, I have to join the Arab Legion and fight against the Jews.
But why should you think of war? We should think of peace.
Oh.
Don't you think it's a better idea if we think of peace and a way to find a way to solve this problem instead of thinking of...
I'm not saying I want to fight against Jewish people, but what I am saying, Mrs. Waller asked me whether the events now affect my future life, and this is what I'm saying. I don't like war, of course. I would love to have peace and to live peacefully with the Jews, but in case of war, I have to join my friends, Arab friends.
I hope not.
How much military service is compulsory now?
Now, if you don't go to college, you have to serve in the army for 2 years. But if you go to college, you are permitted to leave the army.
Well, I'll have to go to the army too, because boys and girls have to go to the army in Israel. Just because...
You have to?
Yeah, I have to go to the army. And just because the number of the Jewish people are so much smaller than the Arabic, so we have to use everybody. And it does affect my daily life today in two ways. One is not so clear, but the economic way, because of the Arabic boycott and how do you call it? Anyhow, that boats with food cannot pass through the Suez Canal, so it makes the economic problems of Israel quite hard, and foods are expensive, and you may get it, but you have to pay a lot for everything. And then you see, in my school it is compulsory, and some it is not. It is pre-military training. So I happen to know how to use a gun, and I know I'm not going to use it now, but but if there is going to break war, I don't know, perhaps it will come to such a position that I, even I wouldn't finish high school, I'll have to take part in it. I don't know, but anyhow, I'm ready to take. And then, as I told before, I have to join the army. And suppose I'll settle near the border. I'm not sure about it, but I'm thinking about this possibility. So
You mean going into a collective settlement near the border?
Yes, you know what I'm talking. So it will mean that I'll be in constant danger of life, because if you live near the border, mostly you have to take a gun with you when you go to the field, and sometimes you have to use it in self-defense.
You come from Haifa, but you know Jerusalem, don't you?
I do,
And
yes.
you've lived in Jerusalem most of your life, haven't you, Farouk?
Yes.
Could you explain to us what's happened now, what Jerusalem is like, and the places we all know about? What is it like today?
Now, you know that Jerusalem is consist of the old city and the new city. It's really not, when we say old city, it's not old by buildings or something, but most of the part is in the walls. You have the old walls. And we have the holy places in the old city, most of the holy places.
Excuse me, this is awfully interesting, because I don't think many people in the West realize that Jerusalem actually is divided. Jordan has the main part, and Israel only the sort of outside. Is that true?
It's exactly. The border is passing in the middle of the city. I know I came to visit my sister, studies there, so I passed 5 meters from the border. I could touch it, and it was nothing unusual. People were living there, and children are playing on the border. And from the other side, the Arabic children are playing.
I can give you an example, a good example. The house we live in Jerusalem, it's my uncle's house. When you look from the window, one of the windows, you can drop a stone and it will just fall in Israeli land. Just imagine how near they are to each other.
But doesn't that create dreadful tension there and bad feeling?
Oh, many times we had troubles and shooting on border, but both sides, I hope that both sides are trying to stop this tension and not to have any fight.
Yes, that's another question I should like to ask. There is this tension there. Could you tell us whether newspapers and the radio sort of emphasize this tension and exaggerate it? What sort of impression does the average teenager in your countries sort of get of the situation? Are the newspapers terribly biased?
I don't know about Israel, of course. I know about my country. Sure, when you have any trouble or any shooting at the border, you'll find the whole country is raised, and they don't like the situation, of course. Especially in the last month when we have the 2 Jewish aggressions on the border of Egypt and the border of Syria. They faced great troubles in Jordan, and of course in the other Arab lands.
Gladys, in Lebanon, you seem to be a little bit out of it. I always think of Lebanon as a, well, you said many people have told you they think of it as a desert. I know that isn't true, but can you tell us, in the political sense, what the teenagers in your country think of it? Are they hostile towards Israel?
Well, as Lebanon is an Arab country and is a member of the Arab League, whenever we have attacks from the Israelis on the Egyptian board or the Syrian board, well, the teenagers feel just the same as every Arab member of the Arab countries feel, and Lebanon is always asking for a solving of the problem. It's especially because we have so many refugees in Lebanon, and about 200,000 refugees, and we cannot support them the way we should. And although the United Nations is helping them, but it's not the extent of supporting them. And that's why Lebanon is always asking for a solution of this problem.
I'd like to ask the three of you from Jordan, Israel, and Lebanon, what facts about your country would you most like people here in America to understand better? Yes?
Oh, the most interesting thing about Lebanon that I would like people in America to understand is that Lebanon is not a desert, and we don't go to school on camelback, and we don't spend the nights on candlelight, but Lebanon is one of the highly developed countries in the Middle East, and it's one of the most beautiful places, as tourists say, not as I say. And
I'll back you up on that. Anyone who's been to Beirut knows how beautiful it is. What are the most important facts you like people here to know about Israel?
I don't want to repeat about what Gladys said. One point is saying that though we have people from all sorts of countries and places, we do have the Western way of living as a main way, and we do go dating, and we do have movies and everything. And it's sometimes they think of any country if you mention the name Asia. So no matter where and how, it depends to all the it comes to all the exotic stories. I don't know why, and it's not this way. But I think I found it very, very hard to explain to American students or to American people at all that the tension is through the whole country, and it's very, very heavy. I mean, that what's going on at the borders affects the feeling of the whole country, and when they're raising the problem if they're going to be war or not. So usually they say, I don't think there's going to be any war. I don't think that the situation is that bad. And well, you do have attacks on the border, but it's not so terrible because they live very far from us, and you don't know it. And the country is very narrow, and it's hard to say, but it's nearly a regular part of the news that you hear something happens. It's either the Arab countries attack or we answer, but it's very hard to explain that you cannot really feel that even from one week that everything is all right. Always something happens to remind you of it. And it's
A
very
state of
hard.
tension constantly.
Is
Is that true in Jordan too, Farouk?
Yeah, I think the same situation is happening in Jordan.
We didn't get to ask you, what are the essential facts about Jordan that you wish people here understood better?
Well, I don't have many things to add to what my friends said. It's the same thing any American will think about any part of the Middle East, the same thing, that we go to schools on camels. We are not modernized or no. But I think American students must study more about the foreign countries. This is what I feel.
To project, I'm sorry.
This is what I feel from what I've observed here in American schools.
Have you gotten any new insights into the problem, any of you, since you've been here with students from all over the world and with American students day after day?
Well, when I left home, I thought that the people here are going to speak about the problem as the Middle Eastern people are speaking about it now. But I was amazed when I saw that most of the people here don't pay much attention to it, and some of them didn't even know anything about it.
Was that your reaction too?
No, it wasn't so at all. I found that most of the people were quite well informed about it. I don't know, perhaps because I came to Jewish communities, two of my families. But the impression that I got is that they are so interested in it Not because there is a problem and they feel sorry for any side, but because now, especially to the light of the new actions of Russia, that it gives arms to Egypt, so there is a danger that the problem is going to be a war problem, and then it's going to concern the American people directly, and I think that's what they are most interested in.
Do you think there is going to be a war?
I don't know. I cannot give any official way, but my feeling about it is very, very bad. That something is going to break, because it's like filling a glass, and now we are in the end of you can't fill it anymore, and you can't. You either have to spill it or the glass is going to burst.
What do you think, Farouk?
And may I please?
Oh, I'm
finish?
sorry. Yes, do
That
finish.
I'm very afraid of this war. Whatever it's going to be, if the Arab countries will win, so naturally I'm very afraid of it. But even if Israel is going to remain as a country, that means that we are going to win. So still we are going, only thing we have is to lose and to shed blood. So whatever is going to be the result, we are going to lose something.
Farouk?
From what Zaha said about this filling the glass, and when the water when the glass is filled, the water has to spread, or the glass will break. I hope you don't mean that you have to have more Arab land by this.
No. How did you come to it at all?
You said you.
I
people-
think she's meaning, excuse me, I think she's meaning that when tension builds up to such a degree, something has to give. There's no safety valve.
Oh, yeah.
Do you feel there's going to be a war or not? Do you think you're going to avoid it?
I hope we'll not have any war, and I'm sure every Arab feels that no war is not necessary. I mean, nobody feels to have war, especially after seeing what is war like.
To project then into the future, if there were not the tension that there is today, what could your countries be doing for each other?
We talked about it before. So I may say that we need the oil from Iraq, from the Arab countries, and we need to trade with the Arab countries because we need the agricultural produce from them. And in repeat, we can give the use of the Bay of Haifa, which is a very, very good way to pass into Jordan, because Jordan has no way to the sea, and in the of Aqaba. And Israel is more industrialized than the Arab countries. The standard of living is higher. And I think we may affect your way of living if you'll only be ready to receive what we may give to you.
You could give sort of economic advantages to each other.
Yes, because as I told before, we may buy from them what they produce because they have much more area and cultivated area, and we may sell all sorts of machines and things which we use and make in the factories because that's what we may have.
Do you see the Johnston plan for development of the Jordan River Valley as a possible solution?
Well, you see, if there's going now, as long as the two countries are in a state of nearly war, or let's say anyhow, it's no peace. So the Arab countries don't want to receive it.
Is that your point of view on it?
I've heard, of course, about this Johnson plan, but I'm not well informed about it to explain. But what I believe from what I've read and what I've known about it, that it's not fair to the Arabs.
But why?
Because in dividing the percentage of water, it's about dividing the water of the River Jordan. It doesn't give the right amount of water to the Arabs. It gives more to the Jews or something like this.
But only I want to know, if you think that, suppose you receive your percentage of water that you think is right,
Yeah.
then you'll be ready today
Of course.
to agree to it?
Of course.
So,
Yeah. It will solve
it's
your
very nice
problem
to
and
hear.
our problem.
It's very nice to hear.
Is it fair to ask you, if you were running your countries today, what you would do to try to reduce tensions between your countries? What would you do, Gladys?
Well, Lebanon is not very much concerned in this, although it is an Arab country and it's a member of the Arab League. But still, if any thing will happen between the two, and I hope not, Lebanon will surely join the Arab countries and help to give as much as she can to help in this situation.
I would say that the only problem which I see is a problem, and not only politics, is the Arab refugees. because I think all the tension on the border may be stopped at once if only only the countries will want to stop it. So that's
Why
not
is
the
it so
problem.
difficult to solve?
Because both sides have different point of view, and when they try to solve it by giving their point of view, the other side will not accept the terms of the other.
What is Jordan's point of view of solving it? What are you doing to help the refugees?
Oh, we are trying our best, but of course we are not doing what we should do to them, because we don't have the possibilities and the facilities to help these refugees.
Would you say that it's the refugee problem that most inflames public opinion?
In my country, I think you should ask his
Yeah.
Well, I was
Jordan
asking all of you.
I think it's the main problem now, the refugees problem.
And I must say that the point that most inflame public opinion is that it comes to this, that the attacks on the border come not to only camps of the army or all sorts of machine guns. They attack our army, but they attack settlements. If you live near the border, you cannot be sure of your life. And even if you don't have anything to do with war, and if the only thing you think is how to grow better corn or wheat or anything of the sort, and you don't do anything.
I'm sorry, our time is up and we've just begun to get into the subject. I think the fact that the three of you from Israel, Jordan, and the Lebanon do not believe that the war is inevitable and are doing some thinking about how tension can be reduced is encouragement to us all. We must leave you now until next week.